Okay, welcome everybody to our first series of dialogues this semester. We thank you guys for coming out this evening. My name's Ana Laura Almeida. I'm a first year graduate student. For those of you that don't know much about COA Dialogues, I'll go ahead and introduce a little bit of background history of what the COA Dialogues is and what we kind of do. We wanted to create a group where we have interaction between students and professors. We set up different topics, and during the discussion we talk about specifics on one topic. We wanted to increase, like I said, the interaction between students and professors. We also wanted to change the culture for the School of Architecture and make this something that becomes a tradition to the school. So each of us has a specific role this afternoon. My role tonight will be documenting the lecture through photography.
Hi, my name is Elisandra Garcia. I'm a fourth year, and I will be Googling tonight. If professors need any images or references projected, please just let me know.
Hi, I'm Katie Chard, and I'm a fourth year as well. Tonight, I'm going to be the crowd surfer, so if anyone has any questions or comments for our panelists, just raise your hand, and the next time the microphone's available, I'll get it to you.
And I'm Valeria Sierra. I'm also a grad student, and I will be moderating tonight. Basically, I'm just going to read a brief to the panel, and then followed by a question. And my role is to keep the dialogue going and pose more questions as the time comes, and then it also making sure that the conversation does not drift too far from the topic. So that's for you guys. So I once again welcome everyone, and we'll go ahead and get started. So before I start reading the brief, I'm going to introduce our panel and just a little bit about their education and how long they've been here with us. So first we have Professor Javier Gomez. He received his BA in architecture in Mexico City's Universidad Anáhuac. Then he did his graduate studies at the AA in London as well as CU Berkeley. He got his MA in architecture at UNAM for historic preservation, and then went on to get his PhD at Tulane University for history and historic preservation. And he's been here at Tech for 6 years. So then we have Dr. Clifton Ellis, and he received his Bachelor's of Science on American History in the University of Tennessee, his Master's in Historic Preservation in the University of Virginia, as well as getting his PhD in the University of Virginia. And he's been here with us since 2002, and he is the Associate Dean for Academics as well as a professor. And last we have Professor Peter Robb. He received his Bachelor of Design from the College of Architecture at the University of Florida. He then received his Master's of Architecture with a specialization in sustainable design from the University of Texas at Austin. And this is actually his first semester here at Texas Tech with us. So welcome, Professor Robbs. On behalf of the students, we'd like to officially welcome you to Texas Tech and use this COA Dialogues as your initiation into our college, right? So it'll be an interesting night. Okay, so to go ahead and get started with the brief. So architecture history claims that buildings are a direct response to socio-economic and cultural influences set by that time. As each culture preceded the next, it left a trademark, or said style, to which the next generation would learn from. It can be argued that Greek temples or Gothic cathedrals had expressed their times, and to assume that contemporary works should do the same. Revivals could be regarded as failures to establish a true expression to current conditions. The present therefore required the creation of an authentic style of times, different from the past ones, but just as inevitable. With that being said, this brings us to our first question. What is the importance of the term style, and what is its influence on architects today? And I'll go ahead and repeat it. What is the importance of the term style, and what is its influence on architects today? And it doesn't matter who this starts.
Well, I can say something about it. It seems that the word style now became kind of a cliche, somehow kind of like denied by the main architects in the world of architecture outside there. If you go to Zaha Hadid and tell her, oh, your architecture is the most beautiful, the constructivist style, I mean, she's a big lady, and she will kick you far away, that's for sure, but far, not here. And I mean, this whole idea of globalization as well is kind of like somehow a melting pot. And we cannot refer it as a melting pot of styles anymore. I mean, there's a lot of issues happening now on here. So the very first thing that I would say is that many of architects today will deny the term of style. They will say, okay, it could be like a trend, it could be like a reflection of what we're living right now, but they will never accept being tagged with style. It will be considered as a tag, like boom, that's stamped, like cattle. I mean, I'm ready for being sold on the market.
It really doesn't matter what they say. Does it? We're the ones who determine what it is, we historians. We got to categorize it. It's going to be blob, maybe, or it'll be decon or post-decon or whatever, and they can still say, oh, I'm not that, I'm something greater. It is undefinable. But in the end, they're going to be down in the history book under a heading, a big bold heading that says deconstructivism or blobomania or something else. So what they say is irrelevant. Zaha is important, but what she says about her architecture is important. But as far as style goes, there'll be a tag associated with it, whether she likes it or not. And the tags are useful for identification purposes, right?
I mean, I think that it's important for historians or people to begin to classify things because it makes it easier to compare and contrast styles across either for one person, like some architects, if they're really good, they have a few styles that may move through as time changes or as they read a book or they're interested in a different culture potentially. The style may change. So I think that I think good architects don't really have a style. Hopefully, because I agree with Javier. I think that especially nowadays, a style has a very negative connotation. But in history, I think that style may be very good, like a Palladio.
Okay, well, let me ask you this though. You said it's important, it's important that an architect be able to move through several phases and explorations and not be, I guess, limited by a term style. I'm going to work in this style or whatever, right, at this point. Philip Johnson is... See? I knew you would do that. I hate Philip Johnson. Yeah, he's seen as a mimic, right? I mean, he did Mies van der Rohe did his glass house, the Farnsworth house, and then Philip Johnson did his version of it. And then he followed up on Venturi with his Pomo Tower.
I find Philip Johnson, he's putting style first. So he's like, I want to do a building like that, like the Farnsworth house, and he created his glass house. And he's like, oh, I like postman better, so I'll build it like a project like that. But I think good architecture actually begins to look at the problems. So maybe either current problems or societal problems, or look at the culture, and then begins to attack a design problem with a design,
right.
which hopefully, if they're, I think if they're thinking about it in the right way, like I think it's irrelevant. Hopefully, it's irrelevant what style it's in, but and it's only for historians after the design and the process and the iterations and the culture.
So the fact that he identified a quote style and then worked in that style is bad architecture?
Yes, indeed. Philip Johnson is the largest. Philip Johnson is the largest opportunistic, wealthy architect in the world. Somehow
What architect is not opportunistic?
He supported the Museum of Modern Art. He pretty much created his job as curator, and he was somehow kind of mentor to many of the architects that we know today. But at the same time, he classified himself as a creator of every single style from the 1930s till the 1980s, starting from functionalism, modern architecture, postmodernism, and even the constructivism. Who the
He
heck
seems like a
follows that?
prolific and versatile architect then, does
He's
he not?
just an opportunistic that viewed the moment to saying, I am God here and I create all kind of styles.
Okay, is there
And
a
I have the
difference?
money to pay for that.
But there's a difference between being opportunistic and flexible and diverse, right? Your view is negative. My view is a little more open. I'm all right with Philip Johnson. Do I like everything he did? No. But did that make his architecture bad? Is the AT&T tower bad? What makes it bad?
You tell us.
I think it's good.
That's Grandma's armoire.
It's good because it speaks to the street. You never see the street level of it. You have that triumphal arch, but he created this he has a real strong street presence, and he defines the street. And then behind that is a passageway, an arcade. And then behind that is a fully glassed, open lobby space. It's 2 stories high. And I think that's a pretty good progression of, it's a path, place, sequence. It's a good progression. It's uplifting to the human spirit. But then again, so is Mies van der Rohe, is it not? I mean, do you like his? Do you like the Seagram's Tower?
Absolutely. Mies is a deep architect.
Right, but look at the way he did that. He took the Seagram's Tower, he brought it back from the street level, he ignored the wall of the street, and yet he opened up and created this plaza. And then he had a similar architectural experience. You enter the plaza, you enter underneath the canopy instead of in an arcade, but you're still in a covered space. And then you go into this beautiful lobby. I think those are both beautiful sequences. One is opportunistic and one is genius.
Yes.
Somehow
Philip Johnson learned from Mies van der Rohe, and we can't deny that. I pull out like a definition of style here, but I want to kind of go for that. It says, style is the vocabulary we use when we classify buildings according to their appearance, structure, materials, and historic period. Buildings are said to belong to the same classification or style when they share many of the same characteristics, which definitely means that somehow there's a creating mind over here, which somehow evolved from observing the circumstances that were kind of raised at that moment, and got the key of figuring out how to bring them together in order to create something that will be transcendental. One of our main tasks as architects is to try to kind of go in that direction and transcend a little bit in the world of what we're producing. Some architects have been able to do it, some other architects have been imitating those ones that have been producing it, and some others which had a little more critical thinking, they were being able to evolve what already is created. Somehow kind of like, not by mimicking, but by understanding it critically.
Okay, so architecture is supposed to transcend? Well, what are the rest of us supposed to do while you all are transcending for us in the built environment? Shouldn't architecture be something also about defining and creating occupiable space? I mean, I've seen some transcending buildings that are that do indeed transcend. They transcend my ability to even grasp what the hell is going on. So, what's it supposed to be transcending? The zeitgeist? Or defining the zeitgeist? Tell us what zeitgeist is. I bet you got that defined in there.
Zeitgeist is a very also well-used term on architecture.
I was just
About
Go ahead.
the latest or the I don't remember exactly the definition, but it's like the latest of the moment, the
spirit of the
newest spirit
times.
of the times.
The spirit of the times. Right.
Definitely, we have that compromise. We have that compromise with society and with culture, and we may have other compromises as well with society and culture, which could be as well to serve to the community, to serve to the society, in what we're doing. No? And maybe some architects have been more transcendental in the vocabulary they're using and the philosophical intentions of their building, in the way they're transcending culture in the building, and not that transcendental as well in understanding kind of the community, no? But I think that is important anyway, because then they're going to be the ones that's going to be kind of like imitated by others. And
Everybody. There's only one genius who transcends, right? And the rest are imitators?
Absolutely, most of the cases.
All right.
You know,
let's
like,
see. I'm
let's
going to
see.
try to pick out the creator here, and the rest of you are just going to be imitators.
Let's see, Luis Barragan. You know how many Luis Barragancitos are in the world? And not just sons of Luis Barragan, but grandsons of Luis Barragancitos. I mean, there's a moment in which kind of like architecture is filtering in such a way that we don't even recognize after the third generation what's happening with that. And when we're kind of creating historicism and architecture, it's exactly the same thing. When I see the buildings in campus, I cannot recognize the Spanish Renaissance that they're
It's not
talking about
supposed to
at
be.
all.
It's an interpretation of it. Many of them are bad interpretations.
I would say all of them are bad interpretations of them.
All except I think the administration building, built when they knew what proportion and scale was, is good.
Well, because that's the first one.
I'm not so keen on the English philosophy.
No, it's
They
there.
did not control proportion or scale.
Not at all.
Had they controlled it, I would have said, nice job. But neither did they control it over what used to be the business building.
But the administration
And that's
building
modern, so it must be good.
responds to the conditions of the moment which it was built. I mean, we're dealing with eclecticism,
It is
it's a
responding to the
romantic
moment.
building.
Okay, wait a minute.
But the other ones, give me a break.
Well, wait a minute. Why is it not responding to the moment that it was built? Who's it responding to? Patrons, right? The patrons must be stuck in the zeitgeist of the 16th century then, if they want Spanish Renaissance. And Texas may well be there, I don't know, in the 15th century. But regardless, it's not just Texas, but it's all over the country. There are people who come to architects and say, I want something in a style. So is the architect's job to tell them, oh, sorry, I transcend style. I can't possibly work in that idiom. I'm waiting for my genius to discover the expression of the zeitgeist.
But are you going to
And until that time, I cannot work in a style.
Are you going to prostitute yourself by bringing a catalog of
Why
styles?
is that prostitution?
And going to the client saying, well, in the main door,
What an
you can
awful
have a
harsh
Corinthian
characterization.
column versus at the
Oh, wait a minute.
conservative
No.
floor plan.
I want to
kitchen
focus
that
on
is gonna be high-tech.
prostitution. I want to focus on prostitution.
Can you pull up some images?
Why is working in a quote, historical style, prostitution?
Because that historical style represents a particular era of culture and society.
It does not represent the zeitgeist, right?
Not at all.
Okay,
When you're the
wait a
one
minute.
postmodernity.
Then let's hold on a minute then. Let's not define the zeitgeist of the early 21st century. Let's just leave that there, but say the zeitgeist has something to do with the incredible advancement in technology, most especially the digital technology, right? Mm-hmm. And all the stuff that we see in DDF. Are there any DDF faculty here? But I will qualify this anyway, so in case some of you repeat what I'm about to say, no one will take offense. I am not attacking DDF, but there's a lot of fancy stuff out there. And that's good. It's all part of the creative, and maybe one of you will be a genius at creating something, but according to Javier, chances are slim. But, so that's the zeitgeist of the 21st century. It has something to do with technology and digital stuff, right? But there's a whole public out there who comes across and sends their sons and daughters to Texas Tech because that's a pretty campus. I like the English philosophy building. They don't realize that it's badly proportioned and out of scale and blah, 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 but they like it. Are they stuck in a zeitgeist of the 19th century or of the Spanish Renaissance era? What zeitgeist do they occupy? I'm really taking issue with the whole notion of zeitgeist.
The problem of them is not about zeitgeist. They are not exposed to what is a Renaissance building in reality. They are not exposed to that cultural aspect of it.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, if there's people that fall in love with that, it's because they haven't been in Spain looking at what really a Renaissance style building is about.
Okay, then Quinlan Terry.
Quinlan
Terry, who is one of the most prolific and imaginative new classicists practicing in England, and I would also say Robert A.M. Stern here, although, is that another one you don't like?
You can continue because the list is huge, my goodness.
Yeah, it's huge. All of those people who are very well educated, and they know exactly what the Renaissance was, and they know what the Enlightenment was, and everything else. They know all of those periods of zeitgeist that we have termed. Are you saying they all don't know what the Italian Renaissance was about, or Gothic, or what? They're educated people. They know fully what that is, and yet they choose to work in the classical tradition. So, are they as ignorant as the parents? And no offense to any of them. I didn't say that, he did.
No, I didn't say that.
The parents who don't understand.
That's the lack of exposure to the culture, not the lack of
understanding. But these architects have no lack of exposure to culture. They're well-traveled, well-read men and women.
You as our postmodern icon from school, you're kind of like supporting
I thought I was
people.
A historicist.
Well, that's part of postmodernism as well. Somehow kind of like you're supporting the main names that somehow kind of like are signature for postmodernity. And postmodernity was a moment of transcendence as well. They were planning on transcending their architecture.
You know what?
And postmodernism for the work had a double code. Number one, to be understood by all the people that do not have that exposure to the culture, but at the same time to be transcendental to culture, to kind of like bring something new to culture in that period of time. Unfortunately, I mean, the idea was really amazing and very interesting, but I think it was very unsuccessful.
What?
Because we see all these aberrations like the English department because of that.
Because of what? Postmodernism? Or
yes, absolutely.
Okay, see, now you're falling back on what your strength is, which is the interpretation of postmodernism. Mm-hmm. But see, historicism was long identified way before postmodernism.
Well, if you go back...
But now you're trying to accuse me of being a postmodernist.
Yes, you are.
No. I was firmly born in the twilight of the Enlightenment. These people are postmodern.
Well, we don't really want to know how old are you, but I guess if you're born that far away.
Oh, and so I must be irrelevant.
I think you.
If I was born in the twilight of the Enlightenment, I must be irrelevant.
Yeah, I know that your kind of textbooks were kind of like Palladio and the Edificatoria.
So going back to something that you were saying before.
You don't like it? All right, get Mr. Rob to speak.
No,
I'm sorry.
Well, you were talking about...
We've dominated it.
You were talking about clients. Should we cater to our clients' desire for a particular style? Or should we instruct them? Is that something... Because you guys, I'm not sure we understood too much on...
I thought it was rather clear.
Well, is it our job to... Well, yeah, because I know we're not going to tell them, don't do this because someone's a genius or whatever, but... should we tell them, should we just go ahead and design anything that they want because they're paying us, because they're the clients, or should we...
No, then you're a prostitute according to him.
Or should we more instruct them, is it our job to kind of tell them what to do, or is it...
I'll respond first. All right, imagine yourselves taking on the task of instructing your client. First of all, you're patronizing and paternalistic. And if you don't know what those words are, they're available on Google and Wikipedia. And then, look how long it took us to educate you. 5.5 or 6 years. Is that how long you're going to spend with your client to educate them about what you're transcending here? Now, okay, that's all I got to say.
Our responsibility
Let him talk. Let the man talk.
goes far beyond anything else.
Pardon? That is your responsibility, to talk to your
prostitute
client
yourself
and
with
understand what she wants and then do it.
But do it thinking as well that you're part of the 21st century and what you're going to be doing is going to remain there as something that was on that particular time.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think it really depends on where you are. I mean, hopefully you can dictate, kind of what kind of style or what kind of architecture, or hopefully they come to you for that type of architecture, right? If you have a bunch of, postmodern images on your website and they come to you and want modernist, maybe it'd be difficult for you. But I mean, so Frank Gehry, after he designed Bilbao, right, the Guggenheim, people came to him and they're like, we want that same building in our city, or and so they wanted that style, and he after a while he was like, I kind of want beyond this. I'm trying to get out of, or trying to find a new style or new something. So it really depends, and if the client has millions and millions of dollars, it'd be probably difficult to say no. It'd be difficult to not to prostitute yourself. But I mean, I think that. I think Gehry is in the design process is a very interesting one, and not all of them look the same, right? And it's not only about look and kind of just in a style, right? But he's really interested in the spatial aspects of the architecture as well as the formalistic. So I think the process that he goes through is one it's very very thoughtful. So, but I mean, yeah, some of the buildings leaked. I mean, there's a lot of issues you can have with that, and I'm sure the client. I think with that building actually.
That's in Cambridge, right?
Yes, MIT.
Mass. Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think going back to, I don't think, I kind of have a problem with the word style, right? Like, just because I really have a problem with like being grouped in those, or not myself, but just like grouping things in a certain way. Because I think, you take a different typology and you begin to, think about it creatively, like using the design process that hopefully you're learning here, and beginning to investigate it for yourself. And, as opposed to saying, starting with, okay, I want postmodern, so I'm going to have a broken arch at the top, and okay, it's going to be a 50-story building, so they're like, I'll put some Doric columns, and it's like instead of being a recipe book, really beginning to investigate it, and I think that is the kind of like the what you should bring to your client, and to not say, well, you want postmodern, you want Byzantine, I want Romanesque. Like I'm not saying like one's better than the other, but like there's a conversation that should happen. Like, okay, well, and definitely educating them about maybe the spatial constraints of a different style, or like the monumentality of that type of style versus the Farnsworth House or things. So like, and looking at technology and things that are coming up like cost, etc. Like all of those things, like the real things of a project will come to the forefront. Because they might be like, I want a building like that. And like, well, you have $100, so we're not going to be able to do that. So I mean, like, there's also the reality of who the client is, and what their interests are. And I think it's definitely a back and forth. It's not like here, this is if a client comes to you and is like, this is what I want, like just design this, or just create the construction documents and let me build this. Like that's difficult, right? Because you go through all these years of school and you want to like, the creative process is the most interesting part. So I mean, hopefully, you don't think so?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, be careful.
Let me say something.
Because, if all that time you spent in school was to learn a creative process and you're not the genius, then you're just a prostitute.
Well, let me tell you something.
Or at best, an imitator. But okay, I just want to ask Peter this question, though. So, you're going to be pegged as for this discussion, but this by no means that he is only pegged in this category. We don't use style because it's not about style. Design build is one of your interests.
Right.
And would I be going too far to say specialty? No.
No.
Sure. Okay.
I've designed and built a few projects.
All right. I want a design build project. It's very simple. It's simply a Loget's hut. You remember Loget's hut? I hope. All right.
It's been a while.
Well, I know you do, but I'm asking, I hope you do, but I'm asking them. All right, but this Loget's hut I'm going to use as a pavilion for my cricket field. And that Loget's hut should look something, I'm thinking, in the classical, order. Because my house is designed by a famous classicist. And although I want it to be rustic, I still want it to be very much within the tradition of the classical orders. Can you do that for me? Or would that be...
That'd be pretty difficult.
Why would that be difficult? I mean, is it unbuildable?
No.
Or is it difficult for you mean, to make that decision or to design that for me?
Philosophically, it'd be difficult for me.
You have a philosophical aversion to working in an interpretation of a style.
Yes, I believe that begins to short circuit some of the design processes.
It begins to short circuit some of the design processes, right? Okay, so were there no design processes that work as a classicist? Is there no design process there?
I think it's a much different process. It's not DVF.
But you acknowledge that it's a different process.
Yes.
Okay, I acknowledge that it's a different process too.
That's good.
So, but would you go so far as my esteemed colleague here to say that it is a bad process?
No, I mean, I'm not, it's a different process.
Okay, so you're not making the value judgment that it's a bad process.
No, I don't believe so.
So would you say then that it is a process that is worthy of some student to explore and even master?
Of course.
Well, let me talk. You keep that quiet here.
So wait a minute.
I'm getting hungry now.
This is, oh, you're not talking, so you're hungry? Is that what you said?
I'm hungry as well, yes.
Oh, you want to stop?
No, I want to continue.
Okay, well,
Let me
wait a minute.
talk.
I'm not finished with my my question. So you acknowledge then that there is validity in practicing in the classical tradition.
I mean, it happens every day, right?
No, that's not a good answer. I'm asking if you consider it valid for someone to choose, as an architect, to choose to practice in the classical tradition.
Well,
Lay your cards out, come on.
I mean, I'm such a personal question.
He said it's such a personal question. No, I know. Well, let me just fill a little background here. Peter is tenure track. That means he's a lot on the line here, so he doesn't want to say anything that might offend the Associate Dean of Academics. But hey, that thing will be remembered here.
So is your question like in my studio or am I the way I teach? Does it?
No, I'm not. You're no longer involved in the question, except to render a value. Yes, except to render a value judgment. My question is, do you agree that one of our students who chooses to become a classicist and design in the classicist tradition, not style, because it's not simply a style, it's a tradition of building and understanding architecture. So if he or she chooses to take up that tradition, is that work less valid than something that is of the current zeitgeist? Or is it of the current zeitgeist as well? Is it valid?
I think you went to the wrong school.
Who, I?
No. If you're looking for the classical tradition, I think, there's University of Miami has a very good classical school, and Notre Dame. There are different schools, and you can seek that out. In addition
Yes,
to,
indeed.
If you want an architect.
And the people who do choose those schools, is that not a valid choice?
Of course, for them, yes.
Oh, for them.
Yes.
And you then acknowledge the validity of classical architecture and its role in society today.
Do I think that they're trying to transcend anything? Or do I think that they're talking about the zeitgeist of today? No, I think they're, maybe they have an ideology of the 15th century, or, really love Doric columns. But, it doesn't bother me that they're interested in those things.
Wait a minute,
but
guys.
I don't believe they're pushing anything or like trying to change things, which I
So
think.
many of them are, but go ahead.
Well, wait a minute, let me talk. It's my turn. I cannot stay like
All right, well, I pose the same question to you.
know, and I have the answer.
Are you going to build my cricket shed?
No. If you wanted plastic, not at all. I know history, because that's the way it's going to be built.
Oh, I'm sorry. Javier knows this.
No classic orders. I know the books by Andrea Palladio. I know the book by Vignola, and I know how to do emphasis on a column. I know how to use Doric Tuscan, and I know how to use a French Ionic as well, how to draw it and how to work it out, and the details and the proportions. So I studied it, okay? Of course I'm not gonna do your house. Forget about it. The thing is this one.
But you don't
In that time, let's say like in Renaissance, every single architectural element, considering columns, brackets, pediments, whatever, it was responding to the materials, and it was responding as well to a constructive circumstance of the building.
No, it's not. Just pull up
Just
any
put up
old Renaissance
Vignola,
building and it's
whichever,
not.
it's fine. Whichever. Every single aspect of the building is iconographical, and it also responds to a structural system and the way it is built.
No, it does
materials
not.
and
It
everything.
is that, my friend, is a simple representation of an ideal. It is not responding. Those dentils are not responding to any structural or other need. That
Every
entablature
single
is
element
not.
of the building
Neither is the column.
has a meaning.
Yes, it does, and you were right on that. Iconographically, that's a beautiful building.
Some Paul is in one side of the door,
And it's just as
Peter is
valid
the other
today
side of
as
the
it
door.
was yesterday.
This building, yes. Because
Oh,
it's a
because that's
reflection
a-
of that particular time. It's a reflection of that particular time. And every
You've
single
moved from
element
your
responds
original.
to an structural
No, you've just changed the
standard.
argument again.
When I see the English department here, and I see the brackets on the roof, like just above the cornice, I just want to throw out my coffee from Starbucks and my donuts, whatever. Because that's not the way, and that's not why a bracket was created for. So every single element is created for a particular reason.
No, you're wrong.
And if we're
You're
talking
wrong.
about Renaissance, with more reason. I would say Manierism, yes, they got a little bit kind of far away from that because that was intentional, and that's thanks to Michelangelo. But somehow, even Palladio as well was Manierist. But every single element on that time had its own reason to be. If we're doing a mimical building right now, or mimicking this building nowadays,
What do you think that's mimicking?
I'm gonna do a construction that is like steel underneath that. I'm gonna buy my columns in Home Depot, which actually they are flat and straight and they don't have
No,
emphasis.
they make
so they
good
look
ones
like
now.
these because they don't have emphasis. Okay, and it's just gonna be faking. It's just gonna be faking.
Your argument is flawed.
No, my argument
Yes, it is.
Is trying to be convincing because we gotta be responsible.
No, you said
to the
every
times we're
element
living
on that building had a particular meaning to its time. No.
Yes.
It was
To
responding
structure and
to
materials.
Alberti's architectural theory.
Yes.
Right? Alberti's architectural theory is just as valid today, and Alberti
Look at
himself.
that. Look
Listen
at
to me.
that.
You're supposed to be moderating.
It's completely horizontal. I mean, and that minaret that is created there has some sense, absolutely nothing. And the balustrades,
It's not a
they have the
minaret.
balustrades separated.
It's a tower.
Absolutely against kind of like what was instructed by Vignola and his orders. I mean, it's just an aberration of building.
Well, I agree with that.
Well,
But it's
you want
because
a
it's,
house like that?
because it's badly done. But that
It's
doesn't
badly
mean...
designed and badly done.
We got a
Fake.
question.
It's Disneyland.
Okay, I'd like to say something. I think there needs to be a distinction and the definition of style. On one part, there is the manner in which something is done, or the manner of doing something. On the other part, it's a distinctive appearance. So both of these make up the definition of style, but depending on which side you pick, there is the way of doing, or the manner of this, which we can both agree the manner of doing wasn't necessarily done correctly. But as far as a distinctive style, this definitely has that. So looking at style more as I guess we can make an analogy to the human personality, that there's many different types of personality, but at the same time you're able to categorize, and this goes back to like the design build personal question, but so with personalities, you're able to categorize things as, you have a happy personality, which is an overgeneralization. But within that, you can also look at the way in which they're happy, or the manner of doing. So I think there's two definitions of style: the way of doing, and then two, a distinctive appearance. And then 3, style can be broken up into multiple different levels of categorization.
Is that the definition or a question?
Both.
Oh, well, thank you for that definition. I'm inclined to agree with most of it. I didn't follow the metaphor of the personality and style, but for purposes of discussion then, style can be identified as exactly as you said. It has identifiable formal characteristics, those form-giving characteristics. For example, with classicism, it's all based in the orders. For Gothic, that's largely defined by the structural system, which is also, though, has that very attenuated, pulled-out style that we call the Gothic, and the pointed arch. Those depend largely upon the structural system. And then you said the manner in which it's built, and that's why I distinguished distinguished it as a classical tradition. That English philosophy building is not built in the load-bearing masonry tradition of building. Of course, it has a steel frame. So is it built in the classical tradition? No. Does that make it any less of a style? No, because it is the style. But you can still have, you can still build in the same tradition, it costs more, but the simple fact that you have decided to use one construction system and a skin or an envelope for the building that is classical instead of postmodern or deconstructivism or anything else doesn't negate it as architecture. And Mr. Robb disagrees with me.
I mean, sorry. I mean, I believe it's architecture with a
little a?
A little a. Yeah, I mean, so you can say style is just the covering, right? So you could make it look and feel like, a different area, but not. It's not about the spatial or really questioning any of the design questions. It's just make it look like that style, right? So it's and I feel that that's. I don't know. I feel that that's less architecture.
Well, what about if process is a style?
Such as
a way of doing something becomes a style. The way of design build, which is a process of building, becomes a style. And so that's why I think there is the distinction between style being an image or something that resembles something else, and then more of a tradition or a means of going about doing something.
Right. So I kind of love Gothic architecture, just because what they were doing, they wanted to have it, more light. So like light equaled God, and like they wanted to have taller, thinner structures. So they began to use the buttresses and flying buttresses to relieve that facade to allow more light to come in. So I think that's looking at that time, right, and religion, and every city wanted one of those, but beginning to look at a problem and figure out an architectural solution for that. So, okay, yes, it's load-bearing construction, and how do you begin to thin that wall to allow for light? So I think that's a design process, right? And I really applaud that, because like they needed something, they wanted something lighter, and then they found a way structurally to begin to do that. So I think I think that architecture today, that is not really questioning, not really trying to solve anything that's new, because I think today we have different problems and different things that need to be resolved or thought about, and I think that I think it's not really design. It may be architecture, but it's not design if you look to the past to solve things that are different problems. Because I think that's the greatest thing about an architect and architectural education is the problem solving. Like you find a problem and you begin to solve it. And there's obviously many different problems and different solutions. As you know, in studio, like every person has a different solution for the same problem, and I think that's okay. I applaud the processes of trying to figure that out, right? Figure what the best solution is, and through that process, you may invent a style, or you may fall into a certain style, but I think at the heart of it, architecture is about problem solving.
And if if two students arrive at the same solution for a problem?
Cheating.
So then, every building is a creation of an individual genius.
Every building?
No.
No, every building is a collaboration of several people. Architects, engineers, clients.
Yeah, it's the negotiation.
Okay. Well, all right. Look, this is a cross-section of Bilbao. Should be. Looks like it. That's a structural system, isn't it? Right?
Who are you asking?
My learned colleague to my right.
That's part of the structural system, yes.
Part of the structural system, right? I'm seeing pretty much boxes, right? So pretty much anybody can do that. But what's this? Is this a skin?
That's structural system, cladding, exterior cladding.
All right. And that is too, right? That's not. So this is a skin, and the front of it is very, wavy and etc. Maybe all of this is integrated in some way, but what happens in here? This is just a series of boxes, and it seems to me that regardless of what you do out here, you still got a basic post and lintel system in here.
Really?
Isn't it?
That's basic? How is that basic?
They're all vertical, right? Except, when you come in here, you see this kind of stuff. What's the problem here that was solved so ingeniously in this room? What is it? What's the genius of this design?
Well,
Wait a minute. That's almost a rhetorical question. I am not a construction guy, as you know. But to me, this seems like a pretty straightforward solution to a problem. I need a big gallery to show art in. And this over here, it hides this. This is where whatever innovation came out happened right over here. But it's still in front of the box.
And then it also
So
has sidewalks in front too.
why
and
couldn't
that's-
why couldn't he just put some classical orders over here? And how is that different than putting classical orders or coming up with a wavy blob that Disney wanted in California and everybody else then wanted?
Wait a minute.
Is that an oversimplification?
Yes.
All right, well, explain. I want to talk about the box first, and then how this is such an innovation in terms of being skinned by that or enveloped.
I mean, it's never just you can. So it's never always. You can't invent everything. So you can't just invent the entire.
Oh, so you're not reinventing the wheel every time. Okay.
So I mean, you have bathrooms, right? You're not going to invent the bathroom. There's sidewalks outside. There's but this building responds to the city in the fabric. So like it was really about like the formal gesture of how to respond to the city, how to respond to the industrial side, the port, and create something that's never been created before, which this has not been created before.
Right.
So, but they still had to have hallways. It might be weird to have hallways like that, and you can't invent every little bit, right? So,
but that was the project then, wasn't it? To create something that had never been created before.
well, to create a site-based solution for Bilbao to house art. So, I mean, some of the larger spaces like the Sarah Room, they actually do have. It's a bit more wavy and it responds to the art that was designed for that space. And there's the round room and then there's the atrium and the entry sequence is special. Some of the offices less special. The bathrooms.
So that's not the real architecture.
No, it's everything's as the whole thing.
Oh, the stuff that's not special is though part of the architecture though, right? It's just about creating something new and innovative and unique to go around it?
Well, you want me to stand up and just leave you talking yourself too, guys?
It's about the space, right? It's about the
Oh my goodness, he wants to. Let me tell you something. The two most important buildings that ended up the 20th century by so far are Frank Gehry's museum in Bilbao and Daniel Libeskind's museum in Berlin. Both buildings are very important for that moment. They are transitional buildings, both of them. They are reflecting kind of like the culture we're living. We cannot deny that the Guggenheim Museum evolved from a particular kind of like software and the use of that particular software, the CATIA, and the office of Frank Gehry, which was the very first one doing that, and how kind of like thanks to this particular software that was used mainly to do airplanes and helicopters now was included into architecture. And here are the results. That was possible to be made. Well, exactly the same phenomena as what happened in certain time with Villa's shop by Le Corbusier is happening on this building. It's a transitional building in which kind of like some of the structural problems that we have on here, some of the construction of itself still is kind of like dealing with this new agenda of using the CATIA. Same with the program. Absolutely same with the program, because some of these kind of like old-fashioned armatures that we have here, old-fashioned kind of structures that we have around here, were created, first of all, because of the technical issues, and secondly, because the need of having a typical square room for storage or for even exhibition, same as what we have with the other ones that are kind of like all wavy and kind of like crazy. No? So I would not criticize that severely, and believe me that I wrote about this building, and one of my main criticisms was that kind of like how some of the rooms inside do not kind of like really are related to kind of that skin that is all wavy and crazy, and they're just blocks inside of it. But later on, after thinking on that, I believe that it's a transitional building in which kind of like that tradition of modernism is now moving into a different direction. So those kind of like moments can happen on that. Exactly the same as Villa's shop of Le Corbusier, which still has kind of this very mannerist screen and these kind of like ovals, but is moving into the modern trajectory over there. No? And I definitely believe it's a building from its time, and it was that important that changed entirely the city of Bilbao. And for me, that's super important. The city of Bilbao was transformed thanks to this building. And it paid itself with just the amount of people that went to visit the building even before it was open as a museum. They charged them a ticket, and with those tickets, the full kind of like cost of the building was covered.
Could you do the same thing with neoclassical, or that could have been a neoclassical building, right?
What do you mean with that question?
If that was, say, neoclassical and
Well,
and the
neo is a very,
spaces.
very good question that you have right now.
It's like at a
Because talking about revivals and talking about neo is somehow kind of like getting back and revising a particular kind of like movement that happened in the past. Neoclassicism was one of those things as well. But it also kind of like flourished and came out because of a particular circumstance that was super important at that moment, which was the discoveries of Herculano and Pompeii. And voila, let's now start doing this. I mean, that was such an exciting thing at that moment. So when things kind of reflect the time we're living on, I think there's something good about it. When things are fake, we just are doing Disneyland, no? And we can talk about decantation of culture, we can talk about filtering of culture and things like that as well.
Can I say something back here?
Well, yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
I think something that maybe that was trying to get brought up a little bit earlier, but I'd like to revamp this a bit. Understanding what architecture is and what we do as architects is just as important as trying to teach our clients about some particular condition of style or the conditions that make that style by what most clients would consider applique. Rather, if we're looking at our home here in this college or this university, we're seeing a desire, or even Clifton's response about saying the families, the parents love the English and philosophy building because it looks, and then I'm going to tie in with Peter's comment saying it looks like something that's attractive. But the reality is that us as architects, we are dealing with sequences and spaces. And I think this is the conversation that's happening with the Bilbao, which you guys are kind of hovering around. But this might be more of a comment, but Peter Eisenman just recently was talking about this very issue of style. And Peter Eisenman basically ripped apart a student because the individual, which was a graduate student, had no idea about proportions of classical proportions. So my question or comment would be that even though we are potentially, or not potentially, we are designing in a different context by technology, a different context by culture, obviously all these things are different. But one thing that we can definitely learn from classical architecture is the proportions. Proportions can stay the same whether a surface is curved or not. And I think that the value of learning from history is not by the applique, making it look like a thing. Modernists did this I think, in a fairly good, productive way, looking at proportions through classical systems and generating new technologies based on those systems of space, not systems of making it look. So deconstruction, architecture out of deconstruction can very much have classical ordering systems of fundamentally by space or sequence. And so I think I just wanted to put that comment out and sort of clarify the major differences. And it doesn't really matter what the thing looks like, in my opinion. If the outcome of the process is determined by a set of really well-known sequences of space, then the building might perform as it should, whether it's in the time or referencing some other context. In my opinion, it doesn't really matter. What matters is providing the service of space to our clients.
Did I just hear you said what?
I fully agree with that comment.
Okay.
Proportions is the most important thing.
No, that was not his last comment. What his last comment was is that it doesn't matter what, quote, style it is or what the building looks like, as long as it fulfills the human need for this spatial experience. Is that right? Sure. And that can be done in the classical tradition, using the orders.
I'm saying it doesn't have to, and it should probably now, because
should not.
If it looks like Renaissance, who cares what it looks like? If it's performing this gets more complicated.
No, it doesn't. So, no, it can. It's just a simple question. You're almost there. I'm going to narrow you down. You just said it doesn't matter what the building looks like as long as it fulfills the spatial requirement and spatial human need for an experience, right? Are you going to qualify that statement now and say, but it's still wrong to make it look like a very well-proportioned and well-done classical elevation using the orders?
I'm saying that's completely appropriate, but it changes another discussion of technology, because the technology is different. You can't, even the dormitory that was just constructed, that's a metal studded frame building. But the style of the skin is based on stonework and masonry. So it completely is a...
So that's a lie.
Yes.
Trying to be like a style. I can guarantee the sequence of that dormitory and the spaces have nothing to do with Spanish Renaissance.
Oh, I know, and neither does the English philosophy, and that's part of what makes it such an awful building.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I know that this is going on, and it's kind of tied up with that. I was thinking, doesn't necessity, it's the matter of invention, so it kind of leads to the style. What do you guys think about that? Is necessity the matter of invention, so that's what leads to a new style?
What's the mother of convention?
Necessity.
Oh, necessity.
Yeah. So does that lead to a new style? So that's why it creates a new style? Or what do you guys think?
Well, it can. I mean, I don't know. What's the new necessity?
As he said, like any function, anything that has to deal with function, if we're gonna need a space for some sort of reason, so that becomes a necessity. Let's just think about cars. Cars, they're all the same thing. There's so many variables, but there's always a constant. You have to have your 4 wheels because it's a physical thing. So it's almost kind of like the same thing with the buildings. You always have to have an entrance. You always have to have those kind of things. So isn't it like the site gives you something, so you need a solution for that site, so you get this style of...
Yeah, I now understand what you mean, and that's a really good question. That's right. What you're talking about is a new typology. And the precedent for that you might think of, if you're thinking about the automobile, say, let's think about the factory in which that automobile must be built. The factory did not exist before the 19th century, really, right? So there was no need for that building type. So how will this necessity of an assembly line that needs to be linear, how will we answer that? Louis Kahn did a beautiful, I think, factory, for Ford Motors. And of course, Peter Behrens did a beautiful structure that held the turbines of the German electric company in Berlin. And those were both touchstones, just like Javier was saying. So necessity does and can drive the structure and the formal expression of that structure. But what style should it take? I mean, I don't know, and frankly, I don't think that is the birthplace of style, though. I think that's the birthplace of simply a new building type and a new spatial experience or a new spatial purpose. But I don't think it's the birthplace of style necessarily. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I answered that. Now I don't know what they'll say.
Well, I mean, I think your question is more derived to functionalism. No? You are thinking of the necessities as a functional aspect of a building, no? And I think that also can be transcendent because the function barrier is changing through time as well. And maybe the cars in the future are going to have just 3 wheels. I mean, they're going to still have wheels, but maybe 3.
They're not going to have
5
any wheels.
or no wheels at all. No? So kind of like buildings are going to be kind of like also kind of somehow responding to what's happening in culture and happening in technology and so on. No? So changes are going to happen with that. No? But I think that's a different thing regardless, other than what we're talking about style. I just want to go back to style, just to kind of get frame again on this one. For me, style happens when kind of like somebody kind of brings a masterpiece of architecture. Somehow it's a transcendental building. That's the reason it's a masterpiece, or considered a masterpiece. And then after that, somehow kind of like that building is so transcendental that it gets kind of sort of like imitated in some way, and kind of that becomes kind of a filtering system or a decantation from that particular kind of transcendental building into other ones, little buildings that are happening here and there and there and there and there. We all know that even Daniel Libeski's museum in Berlin was imitated exactly alike in Australia. And we're like, what the heck? They just copied my building right away, exactly like that. So for me, this idea of decantation is important as well, because also kind of the culture decantates in different stages or levels. And the problem arises when we talk about going back to kind of classicism, and we think in a building, maybe a Mannerist building by Andrea Palladio, and then somebody trying to mimic it in Hollywood or Beverly Hills. If the architect do not know how to deal with those proportions that Jeff was talking about, which are super important, he will end up doing these straight columns with antitheses that are going to be looking at skinny.
Now
that's
different, though. Mimicry is different from virtuosity.
Let me just finish. The virtuosity of the masterpieces, actually. So somehow, kind of like the problem on here is about this process of decantation and the cultural knowledge from both. From decantation of filtering, the process of, the knowledge that the client may have, the cultural knowledge about that particular topic, as well as the knowledge that the architect may have as well. If the architect doesn't know really how to construct a classical structure, why he's doing it? At least he should have in his hands the book by Vignola, which actually is like a very easy manual to follow up. No? So that's for me kind of the most important thing about this. I want to just to kind of use some words here which are together with style, and I think it would be interesting to talk about them before we finish this. Number one is fashion, number two is trend, and number three is commodity. And considering a style as a tag as well. That's another thing that we could consider. Fashion is a big issue. Somehow kind of like maybe Frank Gehry does what he does and then kind of becomes a fashionable statement, no? And then kind of start transcending and start kind of like getting through the society and the culture. The people start understanding it better than before. Trend, which is kind of like that particular kind of building that pops out and becomes the trendy kind of thing. You know? It's very similar to kind of like fashion and clothing, you know? Kind of like all these shows in Paris and so on. And then commodity, which is another thing that right now kind of like both commodity and marketing are kind of like major things on architecture. And I'm just looking with all this this easiness that we have about kind of looking what's happening out there. We get into internet and we can pop out like all these mini stars that are kind of like getting out there. And then kind of like we can see what is trendy, you know, big. Big is big. Everybody's kind of like following him right now. Or Sana is a huge issue. No? So kind of like we start looking little Sanas here and there and there and there and there. No? So, and very fast. Kind of like this boom, kind of like influence above culture is super big. So I think style is coming through there as well. Somehow it's that prototype that gets filtered in society and culture. And sometimes it's more successful than other ones.
But I think the idea of copying that, like if so you see an image on a website, like that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I want to build one right now, or like you take it to studio and like you start designing, like but yeah, not understanding like the kind of the base, either the values, either the requirements from like the program or the city or other things like that. You just basically just lift it and put it in your city. And think that it's great, and it's actually not. I think that kind of copying that happens even more prevalent now because we with the internet. It's trying to shortcut. I think you look at Big and Sana and even Le Corbusier, even Le Corbusier, like when he began his practice, like he went to the Roman ruins and went to Rome and measured and thought about proportion, and then came up with the Maison Domino and began to recreate not reuse, but kind of reinterpret those systems, which made very very popular, very successful, very enlightened architecture. And then, but it wasn't perfect, because when he did all these buildings in France and whatever, and then when he went to India, there was all of these different types of, it's a much different climate, much different culture, and he had to actually begin to change his style. But but having that base knowledge of proportional systems and sequences and construction, like using concrete and things like that in a very new way, I think. To use your word,
Precedent
transcended.
Yes,
and Sana and big. Like, I mean, this is a little different, right? So and people are like, oh, I can do that. So I'll just put some balconies on my project, and I'm big, right? But it's not. So I think the understanding of the design process and beginning to ask the right questions and asking kind of the why. And then getting to the why.
That's an important point, actually. And
without asking the right questions, I don't think you can get to the right thing.
When we're looking at precedents, guys, and I think that's a big suggestion, if we are not critical with that precedent that we're observing, I think we need to be really critical in observing those precedents before start doing something. Otherwise, we're going to do that, mimicking, and maybe we're just going to be creating this style of whatever precedent we used to without any kind of I don't know.
Because then it's the style of clothing, right? Then it's the style of applique or the facade, and if you only understand it that far and don't understand the sequences or why things are happening, then it can only be skin deep, right? I think.
Yeah.
I like pretty.
It's pretty.
Who said we didn't like pretty?
That's what skin deep is, isn't it? Sometimes it's just a pretty envelope.
You don't like what's inside the person? So shallow.
Sometimes I like to be shallow. It suits me.
But the problem is not just that, it's when it becomes a drag queen.
Yeah. All right, look. Let's go back to you brought up 3 terms, and this is going to tie into what you said as well, Peter. Fashion, trend, and commodity. All right, you had your definitions of them. Style is actually a uniting force within, I'll say it, zeitgeist. It is a uniting force within the zeitgeist in its formal characteristics, whatever those formal characteristics may be. That's style. Fashion, and that style is uniting. Those are things, they're identifiable, visually identifiable, and therefore you know what style it is. Maybe if you're educated, as these guys insist that you do your clients, they will understand the idea behind it. Fashion is a variation on style that seeks to separate itself while using some of the language of that style and yet make it unique so that it is different from and separated from style, which is what everybody else understands and sees. So when you're fashionable, you're not simply stylish, you're more than stylish. You have more street cred. Trend is just another word for fashion. And then commodity, I'm not ready to go there yet. But that's how I think of style. And style is a unifying factor within a society.
Well, to
some extent, I think architects have an obligation to not seek that which is transcends, but they should seek to unite.
That's horrible. Well, I agree with your definition that you brought out about style.
Wait a minute, Mr. Genius.
No, I'm not genius.
If everybody is a little genius over here, and we're all following our little geniuses, then what ultimately is uniting us? And we're not just talking about architecture. What has not entered this discussion is architecture's obligation to the public. As ignorant and untutored as they may be in our discussion here tonight, we still have an obligation to the public. And bottom line, I don't care if it's postmodern or classical or blob modern or whatever. Give me a good building that meets the needs of society, because that is your first mission. Now, some people are going to evidently disagree with that. I don't see how you could without getting in very, very deep philosophical trouble. But following the genius and looking for the genius is a very dangerous mission, and it oftentimes leads to disappointment. And that's why, getting back to your notion of the zeitgeist, and I wish you had actually used that word in the brief, because that's what we're talking about. This notion of the zeitgeist, that there is a spirit of the age, that here we are in the 21st century, that digital technology has defined the zeitgeist. This thing, which I loathe and I love, is pretty much representative of it. The technology, oops, upside down. The technology in here, everything that's in this little thing, is 3 times the technology of the first computer that sent the first man to the moon.
He needs a G5.
It's a G3 and it was cheap. It was on sale. That is only in the last 10 years, if not even that. How old was this thing? G3. I don't know. 5 years, right? So it boggles the mind when we think where we are in this current zeitgeist. We are going so fast that we cannot even keep up with it. What is defining our zeitgeist then is the drive of technology. I totally agree with Peter that one way to approach architecture is approaching it as a problem that is not only structural but is related to skin, and that the form is sometimes dependent upon the structural system and the unification of that structural system with the skin, if I understood you right. And that they all work together as a system, that one is not separate from the other. And so therefore, a form is born, whether that's a blob form or a decon form or whatever.
Wasn't that what I was saying, guys? I don't think so.
No.
I think that we're talking about applique on here.
Yes. Well,
And I never defend
what you say is applique is
No, this is terrible.
I know that. I know what you think about it. What I'm saying is that what you think about it is really really not an expansive way of thinking. It's a limited and limiting way of thinking. Because even if you choose as an architect not to go with the zeitgeist of the age, but rather to explore a building type or a building, dare I say it, style, and it's classical or Gothic or any other style that you choose, and it's a good building, both in proportion and articulation and good spatially, I think that's architecture. It doesn't matter to me what style it is. The reason that there are some undeniable aspects of this concept of the zeitgeist. It's true. I mean, a zeitgeist does exist. There are right now our zeitgeist is being driven by technology and science. It is not really being driven by religion. Religion is is digging in its heels and resisting the zeitgeist of the age, where technology and science are taking us. And that's why we have such a reaction to it. It's such a beautiful time to live because of all this conflict. And yet there's great promise out there with what we have. And that promise can be expressed in architecture as this unification and finding new forms and new ways to build buildings. But also, zeitgeist is the negative side of a zeitgeist is that it is deterministic. If you believe that the zeitgeist is the only way to live, not just to design in the world, if you believe that the zeitgeist is the only, that's the only guiding concept that you have for understanding the world and acting in it, acting as architects or acting as a citizen, then you have accepted a deterministic force in your life that you do not control. I don't like zeitgeist for that reason. I don't deny that there is zeitgeist, but the fact that there exists a zeitgeist does not mean that you are not in control of not only your own destiny. In so many ways you're not, we understand that, because of economic realities and everything else. But certainly in your ideas, and that's where it is, your mind is not controlled by a zeitgeist. Your mind, if it is a critical thinking mind, is controlled by you. So whether you choose to design in the classical tradition or you choose to design in the postmodern era, I don't think it matters. As long as you know what you're doing, and as long as you know what you're doing serves society. I don't like the current, and it's not just current, but it is the whole problem with the modernist stance about historicism and style and this argument over it, and whether you can't possibly design my cricket shed in the classical style because it's not in the zeitgeist. Well, it's in my zeitgeist. Does my zeitgeist not have merit simply because I am independent enough to say, I like it, and I want it, and it can be true, just as true as anything you create in DDF. Now, hold on. The fact that Peter does not want to design my shed is fine with me. However, and this is where I was pressing all of them, and including Jeff back there and my colleagues up here, I was pressing, is it valid? Is the classical tradition valid? Is the Gothic tradition valid? Or do we have to be medieval to design in that manner or style? Must we be 21st century? No, I reject that because that is deterministic. That means I can only think in the parameters of this freaking little box. This freaking little box is connected everywhere, and it can take you to a website that tells you how to design in the classical tradition.
But
and that's that.
We've done. Sorry.
It can also tell you where to go for the Gothic tradition. This thing is freedom, baby. But it's being sold up here with my colleagues as the only way to go. You have to think within this box. You have to be within the zeitgeist. And I reject that. Unequivocally.
One thing you said.
That's all I have to say.
Can we just make some closing
I've already
remarks?
summed up.
Well, he already.
No, but
let's say one thing.
Yeah, you can all say
Two
something.
sentences.
It's fine. It's fine.
One thing
Just-
you did mention is the idea of moving society forward, like further, like further in society. And there's a quote that I actually gave in my class from Reiser and Uemoto, which talks about, history cannot create new architecture. Only only architecture can create new architecture. So looking backwards is not going to push our society further or forward. I think it's maybe short-sighted and maybe going the wrong direction, as opposed to really looking to the future and not being satisfied with this or the 5 or the 5.5, whatever, but thinking about beyond that and thinking about larger cultural and larger spatial ideas and situations. That was a long 2 sentences. Apologies.
No, I mean, let's not end it until they want to go. I mean, if they want to go, I'll quit.
Professor Ellis, I have a question then. With regards to what you just said, if I can restate it correctly, you said that to not look to the past to create new architecture. Is that close enough?
So I said I somewhat, yes.
Okay, so then can you elaborate on what we're doing, learning revival architecture? I mean,
it's very important to understand where things come from, like Corbusier going to Rome and being into measure proportions and things, and then taking that beyond further that. So it's extremely important to understand where you're coming from, and not just. I think all of us agree. Like going to the internet and looking like cool architecture and like, oh, I want to do that. That's you're missing the mission. That's you're copying something, and copying is not good. So even if you look at precedents and you just copy those, but really going to history and looking at it critically to understand, the spatial ramifications, different types.
Then like an example would be, right now we're covering Egyptian history, the Louvre. they took Egyptian artifacts and then brought them back to Paris. So the Louvre, would you consider that as an example of recreating architecture from another civilization, like moving forward? Because those pyramids weren't, when they brought those artifacts, that Louvre, they were mimicking the Egyptian architecture. So, I mean, if what you're saying...
No, they were reinventing.
Oh, okay, I agree that's steel, and the pyramids were made of stone.
So structurally, they were, historically, it was about power, it was about, it was entombing and supposed to last forever. And the new pyramidal structures at the Louvre aren't about that. And it was about creating the lightest structure and really using structure and celebrating that structure to create some sort of transparent and new architecture and a new dichotomy between the new and relatively older architecture.
Well, I would say something else about the Yemi pyramid as well. I mean, it's not really trying to mimic kind of Egyptian pyramids at all. I mean, there's one particular, but it's mostly a political project. This project was awarded to AMP because he found out the perfect formula to kind of represent Napoleon. And we can see kind of the symbol of pyramid in France is very important, Equalité, Liberté, Fraternité, with a frigid kind of cat on the top of it. So it's a Masonic symbol, and it's very much kind of representational to Napoleon. So it became a political statement, and voila, he got the commission. But not necessarily was trying to mimic history or get back to Cheops or Kefren or something.
Well, it looks pretty mimicky to me. I mean, is that a pyramid or is it a pyramid? It's just a pyramid with a new skin, isn't it?
Well, let me...
It's all right to do that, but not to build my classical, you can't reinterpret my classical cricket shed?
So a pyramid is one of the most basic forms,
yes.
And I don't think they're copying or mimicking or stealing the ideas from Egyptian political or tomb architecture. This isn't talking about Egyptian tombs. This is a celebration of the structure.
It's a revival.
No.
Is it?
No, it is not. Revival would be if we would make it exactly, or trying to mimic exactly.
Not in the same way. I mean, it's not made out of stone. Or
This is an interpretation.
So
the interpretation and mimicking isn't.
Are different.
They're different, but
yes.
You don't see that tie between them. How they're so easily manipulated to become the same thing. I mean, looking at that.
You're looking just at the formal, but you can use columns in any architecture, and you're not mimicking, the first time an architect used a column. You have to, further that thinking, that ideal, right? You still use columns. There's columns in this building.
But why can't they be Doric?
Because they're gonna buy them in Home Depot. That's why.
Why can't they all be Doric or Corinthian piers, which are square?
Because they're gonna buy them in Lowe's.
Because what?
Hey guys,
you're way oversimplifying.
Well, let me tell you something. There's nothing wrong in learning classicism. That's fine.
But applying it or building it is wrong. Is that
if you
right?
buy your columns in Home Depot or kind of make them in plastic,
What's
yes.
it matter? What's it
because
made of?
an original column made for a building at that time had a purpose and a function, and the material was responding as well to the structural system of the building, whatever it is. And there was a cultural kind of approach that's very important.
Okay, I want to put to bed this notion of culture.
Everybody right now is studying digital design, and you're getting to Grasshopper and parametrics and everything. Why? Because that's exactly the time we're living. Same as when Andrea Palladio was using all these treatises as well from Renaissance and so on. I mean, they were living their moment, and they were applying it to that moment. You are living your moment, apply it to your moment. Well, if you want to study classicism, it won't do anything wrong to you guys, all the way around. You will learn what Jeff said about proportions.
Should there be prostitutes if they practice
it very well. If they don't know it, yes, because they
say they know it. Say they know it. They are perfect at it. Are they prostitutes if they are perfect at the craft and style?
Because that does not really represent our time.
Okay, let me get this. then only the dome at, what's the one in Rome? The big one. Pantheon. So, the Pantheon was a dome that was built to symbolize the celestial heavens under which all the gods gathered and they were worshipped by the Romans. Right? Is that wrong? We're all agreed, correct? All right. Then what is the dome on the U.S. Capitol? Is that wrong? But, wait a minute, it takes a pagan form, right?
It's an appropriation.
That's a big word. That's a big word. And guess where he learned it? I would have expected that from you, Mr. Anderson.
I was about to say it.
Yeah. It is an appropriation and reinterpretation, right?
So I have a question. Is itself an appropriation or an association itself?
Well, do you know what's on the what painting is on the interior of the dome of the U.S. Capitol? Yes, sir. Apotheosis. George Washington, right. When the Roman gods accept George Washington into their midst, the apotheosis. So there is some symbolic connection to it. But you know also that the U.S. Capitol dome is made of iron. What kind of prostitute would do that to a national shrine? This idea that this zeitgeist determines forms, and what you have here, Ms. Tell me again.
Castillo.
Ms. Castillo. What you have with the pyramid is an appropriation of the form. It has been transformed and reinterpreted in its purpose and some of its symbolism. But that's what that is. It's simply an appropriation. Now, my learned colleagues agree that that's okay to appropriate the form.
Because it is using the
But
materials
it's
of
not
its time.
okay because, you have to use the materials of your time.
If you buy a Doric column, you're going to buy it in plastic indoors.
Okay, this was the beauty of iron in the U.S. Capitol dome. This is the beauty of styrofoam or polyurethane, which is used in those columns that you loathe so much from Lowe's, or the dentals. That material is malleable, right? What is its form? What is its natural form?
Organic.
It's organic, right? So do we just throw it out? Oh, well then that's natural and it must therefore be architecture? No. You, because you do not live in a deterministic zeitgeist world, can determine whatever form you want it to take or your client wants it to take. If I want polyurethane to be used as a sewer pipe, I can use it as a sewer pipe. If I want polyurethane to be used, what do they call them? Those tubes. If I want those tubes to be the structure of my sukkah, it can become the structure of my sukkah. It's a beautiful, and just like steel or iron, that stuff is molded all the time, right, into what we need. Sometimes the need is structural. Sometimes the need is representational and iconographic, symbolic.
I have a question.
You determine what it's going to do.
Javier, so
not the materials determining what we do. That's another deterministic thing. It can only be in this system because it's glass and steel.
It's what you're going to find on the market right now.
So
how the people's going to.
So what if you use CNC to create an ionic column? Is that fine?
CNC?
The
machine?
Sure. To cut out. I mean, that's of the now, right?
That's a machine. That doesn't determine what we do with our materials.
Is that
You
better
can
than
play around and do those things, yes, but remember what I was telling. That
3D printer could do it.
A classical structure had its reason behind it. It was not just like a decorative element at all. It has its reason. Iconographic, structural, and also the way the materials were kind of developed. A column was done with pieces of stone that were clipped together,
I know this
and there was
argument.
physical kind of
Blah,
things
blah,
happening.
blah. It's not true.
Yes.
All right, that was all wood, and then they did it in stone.
The problem.
They did it in freaking stone. So they were prostitutes for building the Parthenon because that was originally a wood structure.
My problem.
And it deserved to be blown up by the Turks in 1653 because it was nothing but a piece of prostituted architecture.
My problem comes today. Architects today, many of them do not know about classical proportions, do not know about an emphasis on
We've been over
color.
that. We agree
And then
with
we
that.
have monsters all over the place, thanks to the requirements of the client that wanted to have a Versailles.
You want them
palace
to
instead of a
know.
house.
You want them to know the classical tradition, but you don't want them to use it.
Because it's not our time.
Mr.
I'm not talking about your
Zeitgeist,
zeitgeist. I
here,
was talking
live in the box.
Our responsibility
Get in
with
your box,
digital
Javier.
design and
You just-
grasshopper.
you just stay right in
With
here.
your
Just
iPhone bud.
Ignore what it has in there. It might teach you that you could do almost anything with it. Man, I think you have the whole wrong idea about what zeitgeist you're in. This thing is freedom. This, well, intellectual freedom, but it's also a ball and chain. That's why I put it on airplane mode on the weekends.
I have a question.
But the whole notion that the CNC machine determines what you do with it, or the MDF, hell, MDF is just a bunch of stuff held together by toxic glue. I mean, who's determining what?
I have a question.
Can you not?
Or
All right, go ahead. Who are you? Where are you?
I'm right here. This guy.
What's your name and what year are you?
My name's Jeremy. I'm second year. And I had a question, I guess, for your quote that you said that we don't, I guess, use the past or history of architecture to create new architecture, but are you saying as like we can use it as maybe a guideline? Like we use it as a reference to where like as the Louvre you have that pyramid and it's not exactly what the pyramid is, but like not even the structure, but like I guess the overall pyramid, I mean, it was like an idea because of the pyramids back in Egyptian times, yet they used that old design and then kind of created something new to incorporate that like went along with the building itself. And I guess my question is like, well, not really my question, but it's like, as what you're saying is that we can use anything we want. Like there's no guidelines really. There's no rule of saying that you can go, restrictions, yes. Restrictions to say that, oh, we can't use this building, we can't do this building a certain way because it doesn't go to the now. Like it's not now, but it's like, who's really saying that, oh, it has to be this way? Like, why does it have to be that way? Why can't we use that stuff?
Right, that's my question.
So yeah,
What's
well,
your
yeah.
answer?
Well, my answer really is I mean, like that's how I'm saying. It's just.
But you had a question for Mr. Rob, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just wondering, is that what you were saying as using history, just kind of referencing history, not really doing exactly what history did, but kind of using that, like the post and lintel has been around for countless of years, yet we still use it. We still use it today, and I guess my question is that what you meant by it?
Well, let me read the quote, so I think I maybe misquoted it earlier. But it comes from an 1874 essay from Nietzsche, which is on the uses and disadvantages of history for life. And the quote goes, an element of the unhistoric is always in every act of creation. And so what it goes on to say is architecture makes new history, and history does not make new architecture. Now I kind of find fault with the Louvre and the Egyptian, because the Egyptians didn't invent the pyramidal form. It's like one of the purest forms of geometry, right? And so I mean, while you can like look at it and squint and they look similar, if, when Buckminster Fuller had the geodesic dome, like, used a circle. Like, it's not like he wasn't cheating and using and copying someone else. Like, it's in a new way. And that's such a basic form. So looking at post and lintel, it's a basic way of bringing loads and forces down from a horizontal plane to a vertical into the ground, right? So there's real physical issues with bringing those things down, as well as a pyramid, right? Like you can imagine the loads going down, and they couldn't have done an inverted pyramid, which they actually do at the Louvre. And there's two pyramids at the Louvre. One is an inverted pyramid, and they could have done that in Egypt. It's impossible. So it's not mimicking, and it's okay to. So they're looking at the basic forms and looking at geometry and looking at physics and looking at things like that and learning from those things and inventing something new. There's something ahistoric. You have to know how loads go down and what kind of materials could possibly work for an inverted pyramid, and then I think that's about the design process, right? The questioning. Okay, I want to invent something, or I want to push society, or change the relationship of space to the individual, and that inverted pyramid is something different, right? So yeah, I think it's very important to understand history and understand math and geometry and physics and materials and post and lintel, because you're still going to use those things.
But that's the only validity you ascribe to history.
I think history,
as an architect.
I think history is a great starting point.
That's not an answer either, is it, or not?
Yes, I think everyone needs to take history.
But you basically though agree with Javier that anybody who
don't group me with him.
Anybody who masters the art of the classical tradition and uses any old material that they choose, whether it be created by the formaldehyde poisoned CNC machine or by the PVC pipe, if it's well done and it's in the classical tradition and meets all the requirements of articulation of the orders and its form and proportions, then that's not architecture.
It's not furthering the discussion of architecture.
That's a good point.
How is it not furthering the discussion of architecture? Because it has employed every new technological advance that you could hope to have.
Clifton, can I ask a question? Sorry.
Sure.
All right, so
nobody's answered my question, so sure, go ahead.
What I kind of wonder about maybe a larger underlying issue of the power of an architect and what power the architect holds, and if the architect.
Here it's all powerful.
Well, I don't want to get into a discussion about the genius or anything like that. I don't believe in it. But,
okay, thank you.
But obviously there's going to be people that we follow. It's just who we are. But okay, so the architect comes, or you go to the architect and you say you want the primitive hut built, and you want it built out of all new materials. You want it sliced out of MDF. You want to put everything into the air because you can, and the architect tells you no. Okay, and he explains it's because we have a larger environmental responsibility not to do that. That's the power of the architect, to say, educate. And at that point, do you go and find someone else because that's the age we live in and we can do whatever we want with our phones? Or, do you listen to him?
That's a different kind of instruction. That instruction is one of social and environmental responsibility. And that, again, is the duty of the architect.
Yeah.
If they, whoever it is, your client, unless they're just unless they are really, malevolent, won't care what the material is.
Yeah,
they know they know what they want. They make non-toxic MDF board as well. it's more expensive. But no, I mean, that's a different conversation. To educate your client about the dangers of these materials is your duty. And that you have a moral obligation not to work in them, I would say, on that kind of scale. But then you could also say, can't do it in MDF. He just knows it's easy to do, or she. You tell her, but we could do that in wood. That's a different conversation, I think.
Yeah, but I mean the base question that kind of led off everything was, in my mind, the role of the architect and the power that the architect holds to educate and to embody the current culture. And so, you know, if there are better ways to do things with less material, with materials that aren't going to pollute, we should be doing that, should we not?
If there are what now?
If there are materials that are kinder to the environment, if there are ways of constructing that do not involve as much material,
yeah,
we should do that.
Sure.
Right. And therefore, you know, we should not imitate.
So the classical tradition cannot be environmentally friendly?
I mean, I'm not going to...
You can't get any more natural than load-bearing stone and compressive force, whatever. What is the one that goes this way? Lateral? No, this one.
Tensile and compression?
Yeah.
Post and beam kind of...
Yeah, post and beam wood,
yeah.
you know.
So, I mean, yeah, but if carving the stone takes X amount of energy, and building a rammed earth wall, got a construction plug. It's from yesterday's discussion.
So now you're saying it's not moral to build classical architecture because it's not environmentally friendly. But thanks to my handy friend here, who does not limit me to the zeitgeist necessarily, I can give you many websites that would argue that classical tradition, building in the classical tradition is in fact the way to go because it is the most environmentally friendly way to go.
And I think that you would find that on the internet because everyone has a place on the internet. You know, we're going to find whatever we want.
I can find you footnotes and references and a bibliography. I'm not just the old surfer here, you know.
No, yeah. I'm just saying that I could also go onto the same internet and find the opposite discussion.
I doubt that very much.
No, yes.
No. No, what they would tell you is the arguments against it is it's too expensive. We can't do that anymore. It is more expensive to do that. And in fact, using a environmentally friendly MDF is more expensive. And the reason we don't do that is because it is expensive. But what's the right thing to do? It's to pony up, baby.
But I think there's a contradiction now that's happening because...
Well, yeah, there is, because actually...
Now you're saying that because the technology has changed, times have changed, it maybe becomes not as feasible economically to do the purity of the classical style.
That's a different question, though.
No, but it's the same. I think it's the same.
No.
That's the reason why we shouldn't be trying to recreate the classical architecture because it is not feasible in the conditions of contemporary technology.
So it's not morally wrong, or it's not ethically wrong, or the idea is not wrong, it's just not economically feasible. That's the argument against it. Any other tradition except whatever is in the zeitgeist here?
Clifton.
That's what you just said.
I
That's
totally
what you
agree
just
with
said.
the comment from Daniel and Jeff, and I will ask you something.
Of course you do.
I will ask you something. I will say like, okay, I agree totally what you've done right now. How many architects nowadays, except Demetri Porphyrios or maybe Alan Greenberg or a few others, will be in that possibility on recreating classical architecture with the right orders and the right things?
How many? There's a whole school full of them pouring out of the
one that Prince Charles opened and was closed because nobody went there?
The University of Notre Dame is very well respected, not only for football.
What is happening with these people that is replicating or trying to do classical architecture?
They're
like
employed.
Like example.
They're employed because the housing industry and the public they like that very much.
And how
Mr. Vintage Town.
transcendental How transcendental. Yes, I knew that you were going to go there because you want to live there.
He's living in Vintage Town.
But I moved there because of a different reason. No, I'm not living there. I'm moving there just because of the social
moving
aspect.
to Vintage Town.
But I feel like Mickey Mouse.
Pull it up, Vintage Town. Pull Vintage
I
Town
don't live
up.
there.
Pull it up. You've got to see it.
It's transcendental.
Yeah, it's transcendent.
Because this ugly town is not giving me the opportunity to live in a modern place.
And Vintage Town as well.
Hell, you could buy a lot here cheaper than you can do it over there.
The bank won't give me the money.
Oh, so it's economic. Wait a minute. He's building in the classical style because it's the most economical.
God, it's a plastic thing. I'm gonna feel like Mickey
Are you
Mouse
looking at
living in that
Vintage
place.
Town? I wasn't joking. Look it up.
Oh my gosh.
He just made that argument, did he not? They made you an offer you couldn't refuse. So you went against all of your beliefs, and you're living in a traditional style.
Because I cannot find anything that I would really like in this town.
Earlier style.
Oh, well, it's just because you can't like. So you settle for what's out there.
Love it.
Okay.
Vintage Town.
Well, the
they have
Vintage
a
Town is
website.
like a new urbanism. It's like Disneyland, if you don't know it. Like Quaker and 110. And the whole intention of the people on there is kind of to bring back society together. So the scale is very accurate. Not about the Disney approach of the buildings. I don't like that. Okay? That's plastic. I will feel like Mickey Mouse living next to Goofy. The whole idea there is to kind of bring the people closer and bring the community together, which for me is a bit me as singly living in this town alone in Lubbock. Because Lubbock is not giving me that opportunity to
go there,
socialize with the neighborhood, with the people around it.
There's an example of Vintage Town.
I would say that it's classically, the proportions are accurate, but it is Disneyland.
Why is that Disney? I think that looks pretty good.
Yeah, the proportions are accurate.
Yeah, and that's very nicely done.
Yes, but also,
I mean, there is a master at work.
I have a question.
I'm not kidding. That the person who did that knew what he or she was doing. So what's wrong with it?
I have a question for you, Dr. Ellis.
My question is still out there. What's wrong with it?
Well, here's a question for you. So,
you know what? Nobody up here has answered my fundamental question. They don't want to say, yes, you're right, except him. I do applaud Javier for telling all of you who are interested in any other thing but postmodernism that you're prostitutes. But go ahead.
I'm just wondering if you're saying a building can be built out of any material, and that it doesn't matter if you build a Doric column out of MDF or out of stone. Is the only thing that makes a style the aesthetics of it, as long as the proportions, everything's the same, but you can build it out of anything else you want, the context, everything like that can not relate?
No, this is where my colleagues and I agree. That simply mimicking the style is not good architecture. That's what makes the English philosophy building bad, because they don't understand either the building system or the proportioning and scale system. Sometimes it's okay in scale, but most of the time it's not. The fact that we can do this can lead to bad architecture. If you master any, quote, style from the past and know what you're doing both in plan, not both, but in plan, section, and elevation, if a building agrees in those three aspects, and then what style really doesn't matter. So, no, my argument was simply that to say that this is not economically feasible, or you have a thing against forming ionic columns out of PVC, which can be done. What does it matter what material you use as long as you know what you're doing with it? If you understand the material. And my point about that was the material, the whole notion of materiality, and that is the deterministic force in architecture, is not necessarily true. We can make glass do almost anything now. We can certainly make steel. It's in our power to do that. So why limit yourself to only this notion that it has to be in the modern? If you wanted, or postmodern, or whatever style we're going to call the current zeitgeist. If you want to do that, fine. If you want to use it over here in the classical tradition and it's well done, why not? I think the argument about this is rather specious. That what it comes from, and I'm going to say it, and there aren't any more faculty here except my colleagues up here. I'm sorry to say, because many of them could hear the hard truth, is the split between modernism and in architecture and between modernism and the historicist tradition was that modernism rejected everything. You cannot do anything in a historical style. If you go to Paris or London or any great city, that city is delightful because of the architectural variety. We are a new nation, relatively new nation. And how boring would that be to have Corb's Towers or the Blobs or La Défense, which is badly done? Not because it's modern, but because it's badly done urbanistically.
You mean the new area?
Yeah, the new La Défense is the area in Paris in which they said, you can't build high-rises over here, we're going to limit you over here, and they put a city of like 75,000 people now. And it's unlivable. But people have to live there, so they put up with it. So I've got no problem. Yeah, use materials responsibly and use the materials that are environmentally responsible. But you're not limited just because it's, that material can take any shape you want. So I don't get what the discussion is.
Well, I think you're really like this, Clifton.
Unfortunately, we have to come to an end.
And I think we need to kind of get
but we'll leave it at a happy
here.
note.
Can I say my conclusion?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Closing
My conclusion is this one. There's nothing wrong, guys, for you to study classicism and to understand the proportions of classicism. But remember that you're living in 2012 and using the Grasshopper and using the CNC and using the DDF and all those kind of new tools is your responsibility of this time. And using the right materials for the buildings that you're going to be doing and learning that a classical building was done for a particular bearing wall and now you can have a span as long as almost what you want. So we have our responsibility with our time, with our culture and with our society we're living on. We're not trying to go backwards, we're trying to go ahead. And I think that's far important than a lot of things. Getting a postmodern kind of like validation to this. Postmodernism came at its time, but right now, I mean, it also was questioned, and new things arise after the big discourse of postmodernity.
Go ahead.
Summation. Yeah, I mean, postmodern is really interesting, and I think we're all in agreement. Just in postmodernism was more about like the signs and like symbols and kind of iconography of a period or of time previous, and just assembling that on a facade is not architecture. Architecture is much deeper than that, and it becomes the spatial sequence, and it becomes the way that you begin to use materials. And I agree that you can use any material you want in a certain way, and hopefully using it responsibly. But understanding why, I think understanding the why of things. Why do you use different materials, or why are you using this type of proportional system? And understanding those things, and if you can you understand, if you can learn those things, from all of your different classes about, structural systems and history and, the new tools that are out there, et cetera, then I think you can, make a change, make a positive change, and do something you're proud of.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just being a process.
I will agree. One thing that you said that does ring true to me, and that I can agree wholeheartedly, is understanding why you're doing what you're doing and why you're using the materials you're using. I'm a little more willing to let you make your own decision as long as to what style or what zeitgeist that you want to represent or live in or manifest your building in. As long as you can justify it with an objective, rational explanation or position, I think that frees you up. To say that you're limited by the zeitgeist, I'll simply repeat, to me is deterministic and a dangerous idea. My colleagues have never answered the question, is it valid then, except, Javier, thank you. They believe that designing in another a historicist style is not valid for an architect. And that is, to me, that's limiting. And I would say that in architecture, the larger discussion in architecture, that shows a poverty of imagination. I'm not saying that you have a poverty of imagination. Thanks. I'm not saying that you do. I say that you are victims of a generation that was educated to think only that you had to design in whatever this zeitgeist is. And it is a tyranny. That is a tyranny over your ideas. To be tied to the zeitgeist. You have several tyrants to go through here in your studios. So I suggest that you tread lightly, and if you are a closet Gothicist or classicist, then you might want to come to Paris in the summer of 13. But I am serious, although I respect my colleagues, and that's not just mine here. It's all up and down the building. Even the preservationists would find my statement here tonight insulting and horrific. But I'm tenured now, so I can say it. Be free. Here's the zeitgeist. Don't let it limit you. Don't let it limit you. Explore these other things. But you have to master that. Whether it's modernism, postmodernism, or historicist styles, you have to master it and know why you're doing what you're doing and offer a reason.
Learn from the past, but don't mimic it.
You already said that.
And I will repeat it.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.